The photograph fell from between the pages of his passport like a confession. A family portrait, Richard, a woman, and 3 children, all smiling on a beach I'd never seen. I didn't scream. I didn't break anything. I just sat there at our kitchen table, the morning light streaming through windows I'd washed for 4 decades, feeling my world collapse into silence. That silence lasted exactly 47 minutes. I know because I watched the clock on our wall, the anniversary gift from our children, tick away what remained of my marriage. The woman in the photo looked young enough to be his daughter, but the children, the oldest boy had Richard's eyes. The same eyes I'd gazed into on our wedding day. The same eyes that had watched our children being born. The same eyes that had looked into mine every morning for 40 years and said, "I love you." My fingers trembled as I turned the photograph over. Written in Richard's neat handwriting, Catherine, Michael, Emma, and David, Hilton Head, 2023, last summer. While I was visiting my sister in Phoenix, believing Richard was at a medical conference in Boston, I found the passport while packing for what would have been our 41st anniversary trip to Greece. Richard had always insisted on handling our travel documents. Now I understood why. If you've ever had your world shattered in an instant, hit like and subscribe. Some stories need to be shared with those who understand. I traced the outline of this other family with my fingertip. They looked happy, comfortable, familiar with each other in a way that only comes from years of shared life. The children, no young adults, looked to be in their 20s, grown, established, loved, 40 years of marriage, and I never once suspected. But that photograph was just the beginning of what I would discover. My name is Eleanor. I'm 67 years old, a retired school librarian who spent her life believing in happy endings. I met Richard when I was 23, fresh out of college, with dreams of inspiring children to love books as much as I did. He was 26, a promising young doctor with gentle hands and ambitious plans. We married in the spring of 1984, beneath a canopy of cherry blossoms in my parents' backyard. I can still feel the weight of my father's arm as he walked me down the aisle, still see the tears in Richard's eyes as I approached him. "The most beautiful woman I've ever seen," he whispered as I reached him. I believed him. Our early years were lean but happy. Richard's medical residency meant long hours apart, but we made the most of our time together. I'd wait up for him, no matter how late his shift ran, just to hear about his day. He'd bring me wildflowers picked from the side of the road on his drive home. We saved every penny for our future, a future we planned together over late-night cups of tea at our tiny kitchen table. James came along in our 3rd year of marriage, Sarah 2 years after that. Richard was the kind of father who never missed a school play, who coached Little League on his days off, who taught our children to ride bikes and solve math problems and treat others with kindness. At least, that's who I thought he was. Our home in Connecticut became the gathering place for family holidays, the safe harbor our children returned to during college breaks, the place where we celebrated graduations, first jobs, engagements. James is now 38, a professor at Berkeley with 2 children of his own. Sarah is 36, a corporate attorney in Chicago, recently divorced but thriving nonetheless. They call every Sunday, visit on holidays, send photos of their lives that I proudly display on our refrigerator. For 40 years, I believed I knew every expression on Richard's face, his focused frown when reading medical journals, his proud smile when talking about our children, his peaceful look when sleeping beside me. I was about to learn I didn't know him at all. That morning had begun like any other. I woke at 6, as I had for decades, slipping quietly from bed to let Richard sleep another hour. He'd retired from his cardiology practice just last year, but old habits die hard. I still rose early, still prepared his coffee just the way he liked it. 1 sugar, a splash of cream. The spring sunlight filtered through our kitchen windows as I watered the herb garden on the windowsill. Basil, thyme, and rosemary, all thriving under my care. Outside, the cherry tree we'd planted on our 10th anniversary was in full bloom, pink petals occasionally drifting down to carpet our backyard. 41 years, I whispered to myself, a small smile playing on my lips. In 3 weeks, we would be in Santorini, watching the sunset over the Aegean Sea. Richard had promised this trip for years, our dream vacation, always postponed for one reason or another. His busy practice, the children's college tuition, my mother's illness. But now, finally, nothing stood in our way. I'd decided to surprise him by handling all the travel arrangements myself. Usually, Richard insisted on managing our documents, our itineraries, our reservations. "You hate these details, Ellie," he'd say with that charming smile. "Let me take care of it." And I had, gratefully, for 40 years. But this trip was special. I wanted to surprise him with first-class tickets, a suite in the best hotel in Santorini, dinner reservations at restaurants I'd researched for months. I'd been squirreling away money from my librarian's pension, planning this gift in secret. After breakfast, I kissed Richard goodbye as he left for his weekly golf game with friends. "I'll be back around 2, he said, his hand lingering on my cheek. "Dinner with the Hendersons tonight, don't forget." "How could I?" I teased. "Margaret has only reminded me 3 times this week." He laughed, kissed me once more, and was gone. I watched him back out of the driveway, waving as he always did before turning the corner. Such an ordinary moment. Such a normal day. I waited until his car disappeared before heading to his office. His passport would be in his desk drawer, where he always kept it. I needed it for the travel agency, just to confirm the details matched our tickets. If I hadn't decided to surprise him by handling the travel arrangements myself, I might have lived the rest of my life in blissful ignorance. Sometimes I wonder if that would have been better. I sat at the kitchen table for nearly an hour, the photograph before me, my tea growing cold. When I finally moved, it was with purpose. The librarian in me, the woman who had spent a career helping others find answers, took over. If there was one secret, there would be more, and I needed to know everything. Richard's office was at the back of our house, a space I rarely entered without invitation, not because it was forbidden, but out of respect for his work. Now I moved through it like an archaeologist, examining each artifact of our life, together with new eyes. His desk was meticulously organized as always. Medical journals stacked neatly. Family photos arranged precisely. Our wedding, James's graduation, Sarah's wedding, our grandchildren. All the official moments of our shared history displayed exactly as they should be. Too perfect, I realize now. A curated exhibit of our marriage. I started with the filing cabinet. Tax returns, insurance policies, investment statements, all in order. Nothing unusual. Until I reached the back of the bottom drawer. A folder labeled simply C. Inside, bank statements for an account I'd never seen before, at a bank in Hartford, 3 hours away. My hands were steady as I examined them. Monthly deposits, substantial ones, going back years, regular withdrawals, a mortgage payment to an address in West Hartford, property taxes, utility bills, a life documented in numbers and dates. Next, his briefcase. He'd left it in the closet as he always did on golf days. Inside, more bank statements. 2 accounts I'd never seen before. One with a balance that made my breath catch, enough to buy a modest house. The other, smaller but still substantial, both in Hartford. Credit card statements for cards in his name alone, charges at restaurants in Hartford, jewelry stores, women's clothing boutiques, a pattern of expenses that told a story I'd never suspected. I found myself making notes, as I would have for a research project at the library. Dates, amounts, patterns. The methodical work kept the emotions at bay, allowed me to process what I was discovering without drowning in it. There were birthday cards signed, "All my love, C," anniversary cards, their anniversary, I realized with a jolt, dated in November. We'd married in April. Father's Day cards from Michael, Emma, and David. Christmas photos of the 3 children growing up over the years, carefully hidden in an envelope taped to the underside of his desk drawer. I'd spent my career helping children find answers in books. Now I needed to find my own, and I knew exactly where to look next. Richard's laptop sat on his desk, closed but not locked away. In 40 years of marriage, I'd rarely used it. I had my own computer, and we'd always respected each other's digital space. Not out of secrecy, I'd thought, but out of courtesy. I opened it, my heart pounding as the screen illuminated. A password prompt appeared. I tried our anniversary, 0421, and was unsurprised when it worked. The irony wasn't lost on me. The date of our wedding, protecting evidence of his betrayal. The desktop was organized with the same precision as his physical space. Folders for his medical research, for household finances, for photos. I clicked on his email, expecting another password barrier, but it opened immediately. He'd never logged out. I searched for Catherine. Hundreds of results appeared, the most recent from just 3 days ago. Looking forward to next weekend. Miss you. Love, C. My hands trembled slightly as I opened the email thread. Their conversation was casual, intimate, filled with the shorthand of people who know each other deeply. Plans for dinner. Updates about the children. Their children. A reference to a weekend away while I would be at my book club retreat. I clicked on older emails, working backward through time. Birthday wishes, holiday plans, daily check-ins, the digital record of a parallel life. In his photo folder, I found them. Hundreds of images, meticulously organized by date. Catherine and Richard at what appeared to be their anniversary dinner. Catherine and Richard with their children at graduations, birthdays, holidays, family vacations to places I'd never been. A Christmas morning in a living room I didn't recognize. Richard in pajamas, opening gifts with these strangers who called him theirs. I found myself studying Catherine's face. She was beautiful in a quiet way, younger than me by perhaps 15 years. Dark hair streaked with silver, intelligent eyes, a warm smile. In many photos, her hand rested possessively on Richard's shoulder, the same way mine did in our family photos. The children, young adults now, looked so much like him. The oldest, Michael, had Richard's height and build. Emma had his smile, his dimple. Only David, the youngest, seemed to favor his mother. I checked the dates on the earliest photos of Catherine, 26 years ago. The oldest boy was 25. I did the math in my head. 26 years of lies, more than half our marriage. I spent hours at Richard's computer, piecing together the life he'd built without me. Catherine Miller, age 52, a nurse at Hartford Memorial. They'd likely met at a medical conference, as he'd often attended them there. Her home, a colonial on Maple Street in West Hartford, purchased 23 years ago. The mortgage payments came from one of Richard's secret accounts. Their children, our husband's children, were fully grown now. Michael, 25, a software engineer in Boston. Emma, 23, in graduate school at Columbia. David, 20, a junior at UConn. All educated with money that had flowed out of our joint accounts over the years, disguised as investments and retirement funds. I found birthday reminders in his calendar. Catherine, February 17th. Michael, June 8th. Emma, September 22nd. David, January 4th. Each notation included gift ideas, preferences, sizes. He knew them as intimately as he knew our own children, perhaps more so in recent years. Through property records online, I found their house. A beautiful 4-bedroom colonial with a wraparound porch. The kind of home featured in magazines. The kind of home we'd always talked about buying someday, when the children's education was paid for, when his practice was more established. when the timing was right. The timing had been right for Catherine, it seemed. Financial records showed monthly transfers from our joint account, $5,000 each month for the past 26 years. Money I'd never questioned, as Richard had always handled our finances. "Just investments, Ellie," he'd say when I'd ask about the statements. "Nothing to worry about." Over $1.5 million transferred to build another life while I worked extra shifts at the library to help pay for our children's college education. There were vacation photos, Catherine and the children in Disney World, at the Grand Canyon, on a Caribbean cruise. Vacations taken during times when Richard was supposedly at medical conferences or retreats. Times when he'd call me each night, telling me how much he missed me, how boring the conference was, how he couldn't wait to get home to me. I found myself wondering about holidays. When he'd been late to our Christmas dinners, claiming emergency patients or highway traffic, had he been opening presents with them first? When he missed Sarah's piano recital for a consulting opportunity, had he been at Michael's baseball game instead? The more I discovered, the more questions arose. How had he managed this double life for so long? How had he kept track of the lies, the stories, the excuses? How had he looked me in the eyes every night for 26 years and said, "I love you," without breaking? For 3 days I lived with this knowledge alone. I went to my book club. I watered the plants. I slept beside him, all while carrying this terrible weight. As the initial shock faded, a new kind of pain emerged. The realization that I needed to re-examine every memory, every moment of our life together. Which parts had been real? Which had been performances? Where had the man I married ended and the stranger begun? I found myself walking through our home, touching photographs, souvenirs, the physical evidence of our shared history. Our wedding album, bound in white leather, sat on the bookshelf in the living room. I opened it, studying Richard's face as he said his vows. Was he sincere then? We were 7 years into our marriage when he met Catherine. Had he loved me truly until then? Or had there been others before her? The gallery wall up our staircase told the story of our family. School portraits, vacation photos, holiday gatherings. I paused before a photo taken at James's college graduation. Richard had been late that day, arriving just as James walked across the stage. "Traffic was a nightmare," he'd explained, slightly out of breath. "But I wouldn't have missed this for the world." Now I wondered, had he been with them that morning? Had he rushed from one family to make it in time for the other? In our bedroom, the collection of anniversary gifts lined my dresser. The pearl earrings for our 10th, the silver bracelet for our 25th, the sapphire necklace for our 40th just last year. Had he bought similar gifts for Catherine? Had he spoken the same words of love to her when presenting them? I remembered the business trips that had grown more frequent as his practice expanded. 3 days in Chicago, a week in San Francisco, long weekends at medical retreats. Had any of them been real, or had they all been time spent with his other family? I thought of the souvenirs he'd bring home, a coffee mug from Seattle, a snow globe from Denver, a t-shirt from New York. Had he actually been in those places, or had they been props in his elaborate deception? The children's milestones played through my mind like a film reel. Sarah's broken arm when she was 10. Richard had been at a conference unreachable for hours as I sat with her in the emergency room. David's birth, perhaps? Michael's graduation? Where had he been when I needed him most? Even our intimate moments were now suspect. The nights he'd turned away, claiming exhaustion from work. The vacations he'd cut short for emergency patients. The anniversaries celebrated a day early or late because of hospital schedules. Our entire photo album was suddenly filled with ghosts, the moments he wasn't there, the lies he told to be with them instead of us. As I sat in our living room that evening, surrounded by evidence of Richard's betrayal, my thoughts turned to James and Sarah. Our children, our real children, who adored their father without reservation. The weight of what to tell them pressed on my chest like a stone. James had always been Richard's shadow, following him through hospital corridors during take your child to work days, proudly wearing his own tiny stethoscope. He'd chosen medicine because of his father, spending hours on the phone with Richard during his own medical school struggles, seeking advice and encouragement. Dad always knows what to say, he'd told me countless times. Would learning about Catherine and her children tarnish those memories? Would it make him question his very calling? And Sarah, our fierce, brilliant daughter, who had her father's analytical mind and my love of books. She'd been a daddy's girl from the moment she could walk, riding on his shoulders at the park, sitting in his lap while he read medical journals, his arm around her as he explained complex procedures in terms a child could understand. She'd fought so hard to make him proud, to live up to the example he set. How would she process learning that the moral compass she'd navigated by had been broken all along? I pulled out my phone, scrolling through recent family photos. Last Christmas, all of us around the tree. Richard with his arm around Sarah, James kneeling beside them with his children. All smiling, all believing in the family we thought we were. Then I thought of Catherine's children, Michael, Emma, and David. They were innocent in this too. They hadn't asked to be born into a lie. Did they know about me, about James and Sarah? Or were they as much in the dark as we had been? The thought of them learning that their beloved father had another family, another life, made my heart ache despite my anger. What would this knowledge do to all of these children, his children, who had built their identities, at least in part, on who they believed their father to be? I imagined the conversations, the tears, the questions I couldn't answer because I was still asking them myself. I imagined the relationships fractured, possibly beyond repair, the siblings who might never meet, or worse, might meet only through the wreckage of their parents' choices. How do you tell your children that their father has another family? That the man who taught them honesty had been living a lie? On the fourth day after finding the photograph, I made my first decision. Not from a place of rage or revenge, but from a quiet certainty that had settled in my bones. I would not continue as if nothing had changed. I could not. I waited until Richard left for his Thursday hospital board meeting. Then I called Marianne, our travel agent for the past 20 years. Eleanor, I was just about to email you the final itinerary for Greece. Richard said you wanted the sunset cruise added to your package. I took a deep breath. There's been a change of plans, Marianne. I need to modify our booking. Of course. What did you have in mind? A different hotel? Another island on the itinerary? No, I need to change it from 2 tickets to 1. Just 1. First class. Non-refundable. The silence on the other end lasted several seconds. Are you sure, Mrs. Harmon? Richard won't be joining you? I'm sure. My voice sounded stronger than I expected. This trip is just for me now. I see. Her tone was professional, but I could hear the question she wasn't asking. And the reservation at the Santorini Grace? It's a couple's suite. Change it to a single room with an ocean view, the best one available. After finalizing the details, I sat at our kitchen table, my hands wrapped around a mug of tea that had long gone cold. The first step had been taken. There was no going back now. I felt a strange lightness, as if setting down a burden I hadn't known I was carrying. For 40 years, I'd been the accommodating one, the one who adjusted plans, who worked around Richard's schedule, who made our home run smoothly, so he could focus on his important work. I'd been proud of that role, seeing it as my contribution to our partnership. Now I saw it differently. I'd been the supporting actress in my own life, while Richard directed 2 separate productions with himself as the star. If you're wondering what I did next, make sure you're subscribed. Some forms of revenge are served not with rage, but with dignity. That afternoon, I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror for a long time. The woman who stared back had silver-streaked hair, laugh lines around her eyes, a softness to her jawline that hadn't been there in youth. But her eyes were clear and steady, determined. "Eleanor," I whispered to my reflection, "it's time to remember who you were before him." That night, I looked at myself in the mirror and made a promise. I would not let his betrayal destroy me. Instead, I would use it to set myself free. The next morning, I made 2 appointments that would change the course of my life. The first was with Martin Goldstein, our financial advisor of 15 years. The second was with Patricia Winters, a divorce attorney recommended by my friend Judith, who had navigated her own divorce 5 years earlier. Martin's office was in a sleek downtown building, all glass and chrome. He greeted me warmly, clearly surprised to see me alone. Usually, Richard handled our financial meetings. "Eleanor, what a pleasant surprise. Is Richard joining us?" "No, Martin. This meeting is just for me." I placed my folder of documents on his desk. "I need to understand exactly where we stand financially. Everything. No summaries, no overviews. I want to see all of our accounts, investments, properties, and assets." His expression shifted slightly. "Of course. May I ask what prompted this?" "Let's just say I'm taking a more active interest in our financial future." For the next 2 hours, Martin walked me through our portfolio, our joint accounts, Richard's retirement funds, our investments, the house, fully paid off and worth considerably more than when we'd purchased it 35 years ago. As Martin spoke, I took meticulous notes, asking questions about anything I didn't understand. "There's one more thing," I said as our meeting concluded. "I need to open an account in my name only, today, and I need to transfer funds from our joint savings." Martin looked uncomfortable. "Eleanor, I should mention that any significant transfers might trigger a notification to Richard as the primary account holder." "Primary account holder," I repeated, the words tasting bitter. "After 40 years of marriage and joint contributions, he's the primary and I'm... What? Secondary?" "It's just banking terminology," Martin said quickly. "But legally..." "I understand, Martin. Please transfer exactly half of our joint savings, not a penny more. I believe that's legally acceptable?" He nodded, still looking uneasy. Patricia Winters' law office was a stark contrast to Martin's. Warm woods, comfortable chairs, bookshelves lined with family law volumes. She was a woman about my age, with short gray hair and kind eyes that had seen everything. "Mrs. Harmon," she said, shaking my hand firmly, "please, tell me what brings you here today." I told her everything. The photograph, the secret accounts, the other family, the 26 years of deception. As I spoke, she took notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions, but mostly just listening. When I finished, she set down her pen and looked at me directly. "I won't sugarcoat this, Eleanor. This will be complicated. Connecticut is an equitable distribution state, not a community property state. That means assets aren't automatically split 50-50, but rather what the court deems fair given the circumstances." "And what about his other family? The money he's spent on them over the years?" "That's where it gets interesting. We can potentially make a case for dissipation of marital assets. If he's been diverting significant funds to support another household, those amounts could be factored into your settlement." By the time I left Patricia's office, I had a clear understanding of my options and a preliminary plan. I would document everything, gather evidence, and prepare methodically. Patricia would draft initial paperwork, but hold it until I gave the word. Knowledge had always been my power. Now it would be my protection and my revenge. 3 weeks passed in a strange limbo. I moved through our home like a ghost, performing the routines of our marriage while preparing for its end. Richard noticed nothing amiss, or if he did, He attributed it to excitement about our upcoming anniversary and trip. "You seem distracted lately, Ellie," he said one evening as we prepared for bed. "Everything okay?" "Just finalizing details for Greece," I replied, the lie coming easily. I'd learned from the master after all. The night before our anniversary, I set my plan in motion. I prepared Richard's favorite meal: beef Wellington, roasted potatoes with rosemary, asparagus with hollandaise sauce. I opened a bottle of Bordeaux we'd been saving for a special occasion. I set the dining room table with our best china, crystal glasses, and silver candlesticks from my grandmother. I wore the blue dress he'd given me for my birthday last year, applied makeup carefully, and fastened the sapphire necklace, our 40th anniversary gift, around my neck. Looking in the mirror, I hardly recognized myself. Not because of the dress or the jewelry, but because of the woman behind the eyes. She was both familiar and strange, Eleanor as she had always been, and Eleanor as she was becoming. In the dining room, I placed a small wrapped box at Richard's place setting, a vintage watch I'd purchased months ago for our anniversary. I'd considered returning it after my discovery, but decided against it. This night needed to feel authentic in every way. At the last minute, I added one more touch: our wedding album on the sideboard, open to a photo of us cutting the cake, both laughing as we held the knife together. A reminder of who we had been once. I heard his key in the lock at exactly 6:30. Richard was nothing if not punctual. I lit the candles and stood by the table, smoothing my dress with suddenly trembling hands. "Ellie?" he called from the foyer. "Something smells amazing." He appeared in the doorway, still in his golf clothes, carrying a bouquet of roses and a small gift bag. His face registered surprise, then pleasure. "What's all this?" he asked, gesturing at the elaborate table. "Happy Anniversary Eve," I said, accepting his kiss on my cheek. "I thought we should celebrate properly before we leave for Greece." "You're incredible," he said, handing me the roses. "Let me just shower quickly and change. I didn't realize we were doing gifts tonight." "Take your time," I replied. "The Wellington needs another 10 minutes anyway." As he headed upstairs, I arranged the roses in a crystal vase, my movements deliberate and calm. I touched the envelope hidden in my dress pocket, confirming it was still there. Inside was everything: the evidence, the lawyer's letter, my decision. I poured myself a glass of wine and took a long sip, steeling myself for what was to come. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 7 times, each note marking the countdown to the end of my marriage. As I heard his key in the lock, I took a deep breath. Tonight would be our last supper as husband and wife, though only I knew it. Richard returned downstairs transformed, freshly showered, hair still damp at the temples, wearing the charcoal suit I'd always loved on him. He'd even put on the cologne I'd given him for Christmas. For a moment, seeing him like this, the man I'd loved for 40 years, my resolve wavered. "You look beautiful," he said, his eyes warm as they took me in. He pulled out my chair with practiced gallantry. "Absolutely stunning." "Thank you," I replied, settling into my seat as he poured wine for himself. "You clean up rather well yourself, Dr. Harmon." He smiled, raising his glass. "To 41 incredible years, with the most wonderful woman I've ever known, and to many more." I touched my glass to his, the crystal making a clear, perfect note. "To 41 years, I echoed, leaving the rest unsaid. The dinner progressed like a play we'd performed countless times. Richard complimented the Wellington, perfect as always, Ellie, told me about his golf game that afternoon, finally broke 90 on the back 9, and asked about my day. "Did you finish that mystery novel you were reading?" I responded appropriately, laughed at his jokes, and kept the conversation flowing. It was so easy, this dance we'd perfected over decades. Too easy. Had our entire marriage been this way, a beautiful performance masking a hollow core? "Remember our first anniversary?" Richard asked, refilling our wine glasses. That tiny Italian restaurant in New Haven? We could barely afford the spaghetti, let alone the wine. You brought me daisies you'd picked from someone's garden on the way, I said. The memory still clear despite everything. And the waiter thought we were college students and brought us free tiramisu. We were so young, Richard mused, his eyes distant with nostalgia. So many dreams ahead of us. Did those dreams come true, Richard? I asked, my voice softer now. Did you get the life you wanted? He reached across the table and took my hand, his thumb brushing over my wedding ring. More than I ever imagined, Ellie. You've given me everything a man could want. The irony of his words wasn't lost on me. One wife hadn't been enough. One family hadn't been enough. One life hadn't been enough. After dessert, creme brulee, his favorite, Richard presented me with his gift. Inside the small bag was a velvet box containing diamond earrings that matched my sapphire necklace. They're beautiful, I said truthfully, removing them from the box. Thank you. Not as beautiful as you, he replied, the line practiced but still effective after all these years. Open your gift now? I watched as he unwrapped the vintage watch, his expression genuinely delighted. Ellie, this is incredible. How did you find one in this condition? I have my sources, I said, managing a smile. I'm glad you like it. Like it? I love it. He immediately removed his old watch and put on the new one, admiring it on his wrist. It's perfect. You know me so well. The statement hung in the air between us, heavy with unintended meaning. I did know him, or thought I had. The parts he'd allowed me to see, at least. As he admired the watch, I reached beneath my napkin for the envelope I'd hidden there earlier. My heart pounded so loudly, I was certain he must hear it. I have something else for you, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Another anniversary gift, of sorts. After dessert, I reached for the envelope I'd hidden beneath my napkin. I have something for you, I said. His smile would be the last honest thing between us. I slid the envelope across the table, its cream-colored paper stark against the dark mahogany. Richard's expression was curious, even playful, as he reached for it. Another surprise? You're spoiling me tonight, Ellie. Open it, I said quietly, my hands folded in my lap to hide their trembling. He opened the envelope with the casual confidence of a man who expected only good things from life. That confidence faltered as he pulled out the contents. First, the family photograph I'd found in his passport, then the bank statements, the email printouts, the property records. A complete documentation of his betrayal, meticulously organized as only a librarian could. I watched the color drain from his face as he looked through each item. His hands began to shake, causing the papers to rustle softly in the candlelit room. When he finally looked up, his eyes were filled with an emotion I'd never seen there before. Pure, unfiltered fear. Eleanor, he whispered, my full name strange on his lips after decades of Ellie. I can explain. Can you? My voice was calm, detached, as if we were discussing a minor household matter. Can you explain 26 years of lies? Can you explain Catherine, Michael, Emma, and David? Can you explain the house in West Hartford, the vacations, the second life you've been living while married to me? He set the papers down with unsteady hands, knocking over his wine glass. The red liquid spread across the white tablecloth like blood, but neither of us moved to clean it up. It's not what you think, he began, the words sounding hollow even to him, judging by his grimace. What exactly do I think, Richard? That you've had another family for over half our marriage? That you've been living a double life, lying to me every single day for 26 years? That every business trip, every late night, every missed family event might have been time spent with them? My voice remained level, though something was breaking loose inside me. Please, tell me what part I've misunderstood. He pushed back from the table slightly, as if needing physical distance from the evidence before him. His face had aged 10 years in the past 5 minutes, deep lines appearing around his mouth and eyes that I'd never noticed before. "When did you find out?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "3 weeks ago. The photograph fell out of your passport while I was preparing for our trip to Greece." I gave a short, humorless laugh. "Our anniversary trip, 41 years of marriage, and I find out like that." He closed his eyes briefly, as if in pain. When he opened them, they were wet with unshed tears. "Eleanor, I never meant to hurt you." "But you did hurt me," I interrupted, my composure finally cracking. "Every day, every lie, every moment you spent with them instead of me, every dollar of our money, my money too, Richard, that went to supporting another household while I worked extra shifts at the library to help pay for our children's education." A tear slipped down his cheek, then another. In 40 years, I'd seen Richard cry only 3 times, at our children's births and at his mother's funeral. Now he was crying for himself, for the consequences of his own actions finally catching up to him. "Eleanor, I can explain," he began again, reaching across the table for my hand. For the first time in 40 years, I didn't want to hear his voice. I pulled my hand away before he could touch me. "Then explain, Richard. I've given you 40 years of my life. I think I deserve at least that." He took a shuddering breath, then reached for his wine glass before remembering he'd knocked it over. I didn't offer to refill it. "I met Catherine at a medical conference in Hartford," he began, his voice unsteady. 26 years ago. She was a nurse presenting research on cardiac patient care. We talked at the reception afterward. It was supposed to be nothing, a conversation, a connection, professional admiration. I said nothing, just watched him struggle with words that had probably rehearsed in his mind 1,000 times, in case this day ever came. I told myself I'd never see her again after the conference. But then there was another conference 6 months later, and she was there. One thing led to another. He trailed off, perhaps realizing how pathetic the cliché sounded. "You had an affair," I stated flatly. "That's not unusual, unfortunately. But most affairs end, or they destroy the marriage. They don't turn into this." I gestured at the evidence spread between us. Richard nodded, looking down at his hands. "She got pregnant. With Michael. I was going to end things, I swear I was. But then she told me about the baby. I couldn't just abandon my child, Eleanor." "So instead you built a second life," I said. "A second family, a second home, all while maintaining the first." "I tried to end it several times over the years," he said, a note of desperation entering his voice. "But then Emma came along, and later David. I couldn't leave them. They needed a father. And James and Sarah, they didn't need a father who was fully present, not dividing his time and attention between 2 families." He flinched at the mention of our children. "I love James and Sarah. You know I do. I've always been there for them." "Have you? Really?" The anger I'd been suppressing began to surface. "How many of their events did you miss because you were with your other children? How many times were you stuck at the hospital when you were really in Hartford playing daddy to Michael, Emma, and David?" "It wasn't like that," he protested weakly. "Then what was it like, Richard? Help me understand how the man I trusted with my life, my heart, my everything, could live a lie for 26 years. He was silent for a long moment, tears flowing freely now. "I never meant for it to go on so long. At first it was just about supporting Catherine and Michael financially. Then, I don't know, it became more. I cared about them. I couldn't just cut them off." "And Catherine? Does she know about me? About your first family?" He nodded slowly. "Yes. She's always known I was married, that I had another family." The confirmation hit me like a physical blow. Not only had my husband betrayed me, but another woman had knowingly participated in that betrayal for decades. They had conspired together, building their relationship on the foundation of my ignorance. So I'm the only one who didn't know, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Everyone else was in on the secret. Not everyone, Richard said quickly. The children, none of them know about each other. Catherine and I agreed it would be too complicated, too confusing. How considerate of you both, I said, the sarcasm sharp in my voice. Protecting the children from the truth while using them as excuses to continue your deception. Richard looked up at me, his face a mask of misery. Did you ever plan to tell me? I asked. His silence was the most honest answer he'd given me in decades. The grandfather clock in the hallway chimed 9 times, marking the hour and the continuing unraveling of my life. Outside our dining room windows, darkness had fallen completely. Inside, the candles had burned low, casting long shadows across Richard's face as he sat before me, exposed at last. I need to understand, I said, my voice steadier now. How did you manage this, practically speaking? 2 families, 2 homes, 2 lives, for 26 years. Richard wiped his face with his napkin, composing himself. When he spoke, his voice had that clinical detachment he used when discussing difficult cases with colleagues. My schedule at the hospital made it possible. The overnight shifts, the weekend rotations, the conferences. He paused. I kept careful calendars, made sure there were no overlaps, no impossible conflicts. And the money? Our joint account shows regular withdrawals of $5,000 every month for years. Investments, he said, echoing the lie he'd told me countless times. Except they weren't investments for us. They were for them, for their house, their education, their lives. While I worked extra shifts at the library to help with James and Sarah's college tuition, I said, the bitterness rising in my throat. While we delayed renovating this house, delayed trips we wanted to take, delayed retirement, all so you could fund another family. He had the decency to look ashamed. The practice was doing well. There was enough for both. That wasn't your decision to make alone, I cut him off. That was our money, Richard, our life together. You stole from our future to build theirs. He nodded, accepting this truth at least. The holidays, I continued, needing to understand the full scope of his deception. Christmas, Thanksgiving. How did you manage those? I alternated, he admitted. Some years I'd be with you and our children for the actual day, and with them for Christmas Eve or the day after. Other years I'd claim hospital emergencies to be with them on the holiday itself. I thought of all the Christmas mornings when Richard had been called away, all the Thanksgiving dinners he'd missed or arrived late to, claiming patient emergencies. How many of our family celebrations had been shortened or interrupted so he could rush to his other family. And they accepted this? Catherine and her children were okay with you disappearing for days, missing holidays, being a part-time husband and father? It wasn't ideal for anyone, he said quietly, but it was the arrangement we had. The arrangement, I repeated, the word tasting like poison. And what about us, Richard? What was I in this arrangement? The first wife? The original model? The one you couldn't quite bring yourself to leave but couldn't be faithful to either? He looked pained. You are my wife, Eleanor, the mother of my children, my partner. Partner, I echoed. Partners share everything, Richard. They don't keep secrets of this magnitude. They don't live double lives. I know, he whispered. I know. Did you ever feel guilty? I asked, needing to know. In all these years, did you ever look at me and feel remorse for what you were doing? Every day, he said, meeting my eyes for the first time since I'd confronted him. Every single day. But not enough to stop. Not enough to choose. I couldn't choose, he said, desperation edging into his voice again. I couldn't lose either of you, either family, So instead you chose yourself, I said. Your comfort, your convenience, your desire to have everything, regardless of the cost to others. Each answer revealed a man I'd never known, a stranger who had shared my bed for 40 years. As the reality of his exposure settled over him, Richard's demeanor changed. The initial shock gave way to something more calculated, more familiar, the problem-solving physician who had built his reputation on finding solutions to complex cases. "Eleanor," he said, leaning forward, his voice taking on that persuasive tone I'd heard him use with difficult patients. "I know this is a terrible shock. What I've done is inexcusable, but we can work through this." I raised an eyebrow but said nothing. 40 years, Ellie. 40 years of building a life together. That has to count for something. He reached for my hand again, and this time I let him take it, curious to see where this performance would lead. "I'll end it with Catherine, completely. I'll sell the house in Hartford, set up trust funds for the children, make a clean break." "After 26 years?" I asked skeptically. "Just like that?" "Yes," he said, squeezing my hand. "For you, for us. I choose you, Eleanor. I've always chosen you, even when my actions suggested otherwise." I almost laughed at the absurdity of his statement. "You've always chosen me, except for the thousands of times you chose her, the thousands of lies you told, the millions of dollars you diverted from our family to theirs." "I made terrible mistakes," he admitted, his thumb caressing my wedding ring in a gesture that now felt manipulative rather than loving. "But it's not too late to fix this. We can go to counseling. I'll be completely transparent from now on. You'll have access to all accounts, all my communications, my schedule, everything. You're offering to let me monitor you like a child? That's your solution?" "I'm offering to do whatever it takes to save our marriage," he said, his eyes pleading. "I love you, Eleanor. I've always loved you. And Catherine, do you love her too?" He hesitated just a fraction too long before answering. "What I feel for Catherine is different. It's not what we have. What we've built together over 40 years can't be compared to anything else." "You haven't answered my question," I noted. "Do you love her?" "I care for her," he said carefully. "But you're my wife, my true partner." I gently withdrew my hand from his. "And what about her children? Your children? Are you prepared to walk away from them too?" His confidence faltered. "They're adults now. They have their own lives. I'll still support them financially, of course, but you'll no longer be their father after 25 years? 23? 20? I shook my head. "You can't have it both ways anymore, Richard. You can't be everything to everyone." "Please," he said, his voice breaking. "Don't throw away 40 years because of my mistakes. We can start fresh. Take that trip to Greece, just the two of us. Reconnect. Remember why we fell in love in the first place." "The man I fell in love with doesn't exist," I said quietly. "Maybe he never did." "That's not true," Richard insisted, desperation creeping into his voice. "I'm still me. Still the man who loves you, who built a life with you, who raised our beautiful children with you, while simultaneously building another life with another woman and raising another set of children," I reminded him. "That's not love, Richard. That's selfishness on a scale I can barely comprehend." "I never meant to hurt you," he said, tears welling in his eyes again. "You have to believe that." He reached for my hand across the table, his eyes pleading. "I never meant to hurt you," he said, as if intention could erase 26 years of betrayal. For hours, we sat at that table, the remnants of our anniversary dinner growing cold between us. The candles burned down to stubs, wax pooling on my grandmother's silver candlesticks. Outside, a gentle spring rain began to fall, tapping against the windows like a metronome counting the seconds of our unraveling marriage. As Richard continued his desperate attempts to salvage what couldn't be saved, something shifted inside me. The numbness that had protected me since finding the photograph began to crack, allowing the full force of my pain to emerge. It started as a tightness in my chest, a physical ache that made it difficult to breathe. Then came a wave of nausea so intense I had to press my hand to my mouth. My ears began to ring, drowning out Richard's words as he continued pleading his case. "Eleanor?" His voice sounded distant, concerned. "Are you all right?" I shook my head, unable to speak. 40 years of memories flashed before me. Our wedding day, Richard's face alight with joy as he saw me walking down the aisle. The birth of our children, his tears of happiness as he held them for the first time. Countless anniversaries, birthdays, ordinary days made special by our love for each other. All lies, or at least all half-truths, tainted by the knowledge that for more than half our marriage, he had been living another life parallel to ours. "I need a moment," I managed to say, rising unsteadily from my chair. I made it to the powder room just in time, retching violently into the toilet, my body physically rejecting the betrayal my mind was still struggling to process. I rinsed my mouth and stared at my reflection in the mirror. My carefully applied makeup was streaked with tears I hadn't realized I was shedding. The sapphire necklace, his gift for our 40th anniversary, felt like it was choking me. I unclasped it with trembling fingers and set it on the counter. When I returned to the dining room, Richard was standing by the window, staring out at the rain. He turned when he heard me, his face etched with concern that once would have moved me. "Ellie." "Don't call me that," I said, my voice raw. "Not anymore." He nodded, accepting this small boundary at least. "Eleanor, please sit down. You're pale." I ignored his suggestion, remaining standing. The physical distance between us felt necessary now. "Do you know what hurts the most?" I asked, my voice steadier than I expected. "It's not just the betrayal, though that's excruciating. It's the theft." "Theft?" he repeated, confused. "You stole my choices, Richard. For 26 years, you decided what our reality would be. You chose for both of us, without my knowledge or consent. You robbed me of the truth, and in doing so, you stole my agency, my autonomy, my ability to make informed decisions about my own life." He started to speak, but I held up my hand. "I'm not finished. You stole time. Time I can never get back. Time I might have spent building a different life, with someone who was capable of honesty. You stole my trust, not just in you, but in my own judgment, my own perceptions. How can I ever trust myself again, when I was so completely deceived by the person closest to me?" Tears streamed down my face now, but I made no move to wipe them away. Let him see the pain he'd caused. Let him witness the consequences of his choices. "And you stole my past," I continued, my voice breaking. "Every memory is now suspect. Every happy moment questioned. Did you come home from the hospital and kiss me after kissing her? Did you tell me you loved me after telling her the same thing? Was any of it real, or was it all just a performance to maintain your comfortable double life?" Richard moved toward me, his hands outstretched, but I stepped back. "Don't," I warned. "Don't touch me." He stopped, his arms falling to his sides. "I don't know what to say," he whispered, "except that I'm sorry, so deeply sorry." "Sorry you did it, or sorry you got caught?" I asked. He had no answer for that. I realized I wasn't just mourning the end of my marriage. I was mourning the woman I'd been, trusting, devoted, blind. As the initial wave of pain subsided, questions about Catherine began to surface, questions I both dreaded and needed to ask. "Tell me about her," I said, returning to my seat at the table. The physical act of sitting down helped steady me, gave me something concrete to focus on, besides the hurricane of emotions threatening to overwhelm me. Richard looked surprised by the request. "Catherine?" "Yes. The woman you've been sharing your life with for 26 years. the mother of your other children. I think I deserve to know who she is." He sat down heavily, running a hand through his silver hair, a nervous gesture I'd seen countless times over our decades together. Now I wondered if Catherine recognized it too, if she found it endearing as I once had. "She's a cardiac nurse. We met at that conference in Hartford, as I said. She was presenting research on post-operative care protocols." He paused, perhaps realizing that starting with her professional credentials wasn't what I was asking for. "She's 52 now, from Connecticut originally, grew up in New Haven." "Does she look like me?" I asked, the question escaping before I could stop it. Richard shook his head. "No, she's different, shorter, dark hair, though it's starting to gray now. Brown eyes." I nodded, absorbing this. Not a younger version of me then. Not a replacement. Something else entirely. "What does she know about me? About our life together?" He shifted uncomfortably. "She knows you're a librarian, that we have 2 children, that we live in this house." "Has she seen pictures of me? Of our family?" "Some," he admitted. "Nothing recent." The thought of this woman, this stranger, looking at photos of me, of my children, sent a chill through me. Had she studied my face, wondering about the woman who shared her lover's life? Had she felt guilt, or simply acceptance of the unusual arrangement? "And what did you tell her about our marriage?" I pressed. "Did you complain about me to her? Tell her we were growing apart? That we stayed together only for the children? The classic justifications for infidelity?" "No," Richard said firmly. "I never disparaged you or our marriage. That's the truth, Eleanor." "A rare commodity from you," I noted dryly. He winced but continued. "Catherine understood from the beginning that I wouldn't leave you. That wasn't part of our arrangement." "How magnanimous of her," I said, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. "And she was content with this? Being the second wife in all but name? Sharing you with another family?" "It wasn't ideal for her either," Richard said quietly. "There were difficult times, especially when the children were young. She wanted more of me than I could give. Yet she stayed, for 26 years. Yes." "Why?" I asked, genuinely curious. Why would an intelligent professional woman accept such an arrangement for over 2 decades? Richard was silent for a long moment. "She loves me," he finally said, the words barely audible. "And I think she believed that eventually, when the time was right, I would choose her. Fully." The implication hung in the air between us. When our children were grown, when we were older, when I was perhaps gone. "Did you ever intend to leave me for her?" I asked, needing to know. "No," he said, meeting my eyes. "Despite everything, I never wanted our marriage to end." "You just wanted everything. Both marriages, both families, both lives. The complete Richard Harmon collection." He looked away, unable to deny the truth of my assessment. "Does she have friends? Family? People who know about your relationship?" "Yes. Her parents have passed, but she has a sister in Boston. Friends from the hospital, neighbors. And do they know about me?" "Some do. Others think I'm divorced, I believe." I absorbed this information, trying to picture the network of people who had been complicit in or adjacent to my husband's deception. How many dinner parties had Catherine hosted where I was discussed? How many neighbors had watched Richard come and go from her house, assuming he was simply a divorced father sharing custody of his children? In some strange way, Catherine and I were both victims of the same lie. But only one of us had lived it for 40 years. The grandfather clock struck midnight, its chimes echoing through our silent house. We had been talking for hours, excavating the ruins of our marriage, uncovering artifacts of deception I never could have imagined. "What about James and Sarah?" I finally asked, voicing the question that had been weighing on me since my discovery. What do we tell them? Richard's face paled further, if that was possible. Must we tell them anything? They're adults with their own lives, their own families. This would devastate them, Eleanor. And what's the alternative? I countered. Continuing the lie? Pretending everything is fine while we separate? They'll ask questions, Richard. They'll want to know why their parents' 40-year marriage suddenly ended. He rubbed his temples, a gesture of defeat. Could we simplify? Say I had an affair, a recent indiscretion? It would be painful enough, but not the full truth, I finished for him. Not the fact that their father has been living a double life for most of their lives, that he has 3 other children they've never met, siblings they don't know exist. Richard winced at each statement. It would destroy their image of me, he whispered. An image built on lies, I reminded him. Why should you be protected from the consequences of your actions? Why should I have to carry this burden alone, or worse, become complicit in your deception by creating a more palatable version of the truth? I'm not asking for protection, he said, though his tone suggested otherwise. I'm thinking of them, of the pain this will cause them. Pain you caused, I said firmly. Not me. You created this situation, Richard. Every lie, every deception, every choice that led us here. Those were your decisions, not mine. He nodded, accepting this truth at least. What about Catherine's children? My other children. They don't know about you either, about James and Sarah. The reminder that there were 3 more innocent people involved in this mess, 3 more lives that would be upended by the revelation of their father's deception, made my heart ache despite my anger. That's a separate issue, I said. One you'll have to address with Catherine. My concern is for our children, James and Sarah. They're my children too, Richard said, a note of desperation in his voice. Please, Eleanor, I'm begging you. Don't tell them everything. It will destroy my relationship with them. You should have thought of that possibility 26 years ago, I said, but without the heat of earlier. I was too exhausted for anger now. But this isn't about punishing you, Richard. It's about honesty, about respect. Our children deserve the truth. And if telling them the truth hurts them more than a partial truth would, he challenged. What then? Are you willing to cause them pain just to ensure I face the full consequences of my actions? The question gave me pause. Was I letting my own hurt and anger cloud my judgment? Was there a way to be honest with our children without devastating them? I don't know, I admitted finally. I need time to think about this, to decide what's best for them, not just what feels right in this moment. Richard looked relieved at this small concession. Thank you, he said softly. Don't thank me yet, I warned. I haven't decided anything, and whatever I decide, you need to understand something. I won't lie for you. I won't pretend this was a recent affair or a momentary lapse in judgment. If James or Sarah ask me directly what happened, I will tell them the truth. All of it? He asked, his voice barely audible. As much as they need to know, I replied. As much as respects their right to understand why their parents' marriage has ended. Richard nodded slowly, accepting the terms of this temporary truce. And what about us? What happens now? I looked at him across the table, this man I'd loved for 40 years, this stranger I'd never truly known, and felt a profound weariness settle over me. Our children deserved the truth. But did they deserve the pain that came with it? That was the question that kept me awake that night. After our confrontation, I couldn't bear to sleep in our bedroom, not with him, not with the weight of 40 years of lies between us. I took a blanket and pillow to the guest room, ignoring Richard's protests and pleas for us to keep talking. There's nothing more to say tonight, I told him, my voice hollow with exhaustion. I need space. I need to think. Alone in the unfamiliar bed, surrounded by the generic decor of a room meant for visitors, I stared at the ceiling as the digital clock on the nightstand marked the passing hours. 1:17 a.m., 2:34 a.m., 3:52 a.m. Sleep remained elusive, chased away by the carousel of thoughts spinning through my mind. What would I do now? At 67, I had never imagined starting over. Our retirement plans, our future travels, our golden years together, all built on a foundation that had just crumbled beneath my feet. I thought about practical matters first, perhaps as a way to avoid the deeper emotional questions. The house, would I stay or go? Our finances, how would they be divided? My daily routines, how many of them were intertwined with Richard's presence, with our life together? Then came thoughts of our children, our grandchildren. How would this affect them? Would holidays be divided now? Would Richard bring his other family into the open? Would James and Sarah be expected to accept these half-siblings they never knew existed? Around 4 a.m., I heard Richard moving around downstairs, the clink of a glass, the opening and closing of the liquor cabinet. Was he drinking to numb his pain, or to escape the reality of what he'd done? I found I didn't care. I reached for my phone on the nightstand and opened the photo gallery. Pictures of our family filled the screen. James and his wife with their children at Christmas, Sarah at her law firm's annual dinner, the 5 of us at our last family vacation to the Maine coast. Happy, smiling faces. A perfect family portrait. Except it wasn't perfect. It wasn't even complete. There were 3 other people who shared Richard's blood, who had a claim to him as father. 3 strangers who were, biologically at least, connected to my children, to my grandchildren. I set the phone down and pressed my palms against my eyes, trying to stem the fresh tears that threatened. The betrayal felt physical, a wound that throbbed with each heartbeat. Yet beneath the pain, something else was stirring, a quiet voice that whispered, "You will survive this. You are more than this marriage. You are more than his betrayal." I thought about who I had been before Richard, the ambitious young woman with dreams of her own, who loved books and ideas and had planned to travel the world. Somewhere along the way, those individual dreams had merged with our shared ones, until I couldn't quite remember which were originally mine. Perhaps that was part of marriage, that gradual blending of 2 lives into one shared path. But now that path had split, and I needed to rediscover my own way forward. As dawn broke, painting the guest room with pale golden light, a strange calm settled over me. Not acceptance, not yet, but a kind of clarity. I couldn't change the past. I couldn't undo Richard's betrayal or erase the pain it had caused. But I could decide what happened next. I could choose my own path forward, on my own terms. I rose from the bed and went to the window, watching as the sun climbed above the horizon. Our cherry tree was in full bloom, pink blossoms catching the early morning light. I had always loved spring, the promise of renewal, of life beginning again after the long winter. I had discovered my husband's 26-year double life, and now I had made my decision. But before I confronted Richard with what I knew, I needed to prepare for the aftermath. Would I really follow through with divorcing the man I'd been married to for 40 years? How would our children react when they learned their father had another family? And what would happen when I finally confronted the man who had betrayed me in the most unimaginable way? Find out in part 2 of my story, coming this Sunday at 7 p.m. Make sure you've subscribed and turned on notifications so you don't miss what happens when I finally confront the man who stole 26 years of my life. Comment below with what you think I should do next. And if you know someone who would be captivated by my story, share it with them now. Part 2 reveals the most devastating moment yet, when I delivered the revenge that left my husband in tears and changed both our lives forever. Thank you for watching part 1 of this shocking story of betrayal and revenge. Will Eleanor follow through with her plans to divorce Richard after 40 years of marriage? How will their children react to the devastating truth? Find out in part 2, coming this Sunday. Make sure you've subscribed and turned on notifications so you don't miss the conclusion of this emotional journey. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and share it with someone who appreciates powerful stories of betrayal and justice. Comment below with your thoughts on Eleanor's situation and what you think she should do next. Part 2 drops Sunday at 7 p.m. You won't want to miss how this story ends.